Good morning.
Not much time has passed since the death of Pope Francis, but what do you think is the most important legacy he left to the world and Christianity?
In times of war, the greatest legacy that the warring parties and the entire European, Western, human civilization can receive is peace itself. I believe that the Holy Father has a legacy of peace. He was a man of peace, which in our minds means that he was a gentle man. This is also true. But there was another side to his personality. This was perhaps less often shown outwardly. I mean, he was an unwaveringly brave man, because standing up for peace in the past 3 years has meant daily attacks, stigmatization, and harassment, and the Holy Father has also been under constant fire for the past 3 years by the pro-war propaganda network, which is a large international network, including the Hungarians, and has tried to persuade him to give up his pro-peace stance, and he has not done so. This is a personal courage in itself, but it was especially important for us Hungarians, because in the past 3 years, until the victory of President Donald Trump, only 2 of us in the entire Western world have consistently stood for peace: Hungary and the Vatican. And when you are alone, and in the European Council we were always alone 26-1, fighting for peace, then all friendship and support becomes more important. Thus, the friendship and support of the Pope, who constantly called on Hungary to stand up for peace with courage, also increased in importance. Moreover, since this is after all the earthly vicar of St. Peter, his support gave a supernatural weight to truth, peace, that is, to the cause that we Hungarians also represent.
Right. When we're talking about the relationship between Hungary and the Pope, it's extremely rare for a Catholic head of the Church to visit the same country twice, and this happened in Hungary, since he visited here twice. What could be the reason for this? What could be the reason that Hungary had such a special place in his eyes?
I have to be careful, but I will say that I visited the Hungarians 3 times, twice in Lesser Hungary and once in a small town. So, for St. Tatya to meet with a national community 3 times in the space of a few years is truly unprecedented, I think. Now, beyond the peace issue, which obviously played a role in this, the truth is that he may have had a personal motive. He did not hide it. He was an Argentinian. He came to Rome from there. And there he worked with Hungarian abbots and a Hungarian community of believers. So he knew the Hungarians, and he was among those who decided that the Hungarians were good people. Ordinary people. He obviously experienced this. That's why he liked us, for example. He liked to say Hungarian sentences. He knew a few Hungarian sentences, simple ones like thank you and greetings, and he was happy to use them. And I felt, when I met him, that there is naturally a Christian community that unites us, a community of faith. But beyond that, behind this, there is also a different type of national-based sympathy, an Argentinian who liked Hungarians.
Many experts say that it is unnecessary to speculate about the successor, and perhaps it is not appropriate now, even in his time of mourning. At the same time, an important question is, what challenges await his successor, both in terms of the situation of Christianity and in terms of world politics? Because, as you mentioned, Pope Francis was very active in the latter area as well.
I think that, from the perspective of Hungary, it is of great importance how the Holy See continues its international relations and policies, who will be its next pope and how it relates to Hungary. This is important because the Catholic Church of Hungary, the Hungarian Catholic Church, plays an extremely important role in the life of Hungarian society. There are very few churches like the Hungarian Catholic Church, which takes on such a huge and irreplaceable role in organizing the Hungarian community. That is, the life of Hungarians, as they do. Numerous schools, kindergartens, vocational training institutions, a huge university, care for the elderly, care for the disabled, through the beloved Maltese ministry, strong participation in Roma integration. So without the Hungarian Catholic Church, it would be very difficult to imagine the life of Hungarian society, not only in terms of faith, well, it would be impossible to imagine it at all, but in the construction and maintenance of social networks of society, in solidarity, in dealing with the disabled, in matters of spiritual support and comfort. The country would not thrive without the Hungarian Catholic Church. This is the situation. This is a universal church, so its center is not in Rome. So I think there is a connection between the relationship the Hungarian Catholic Church will have with Rome, the support it receives from there, and the valuable work it can do for the Hungarian community. So I am also excited to see what will happen, even though it may not be the time for excitement yet, because we are living in a day of mourning here, and the predominant feeling is still pain, the pain of loss, but undoubtedly, life goes on, and the leadership of the Holy See is called to take care of this with women, and their decision will have an impact in Hungary.
He mentioned Pope Francis's efforts for peace, and that when we look at the Russian-Ukrainian war, the news changes from day to day. One day we hear about progress in negotiations. The next day we hear about serious missile attacks. And meanwhile, an organization close to the European Commission, the European Policy Center, writes in a recent analysis that troops should be sent to Ukraine before the summer. However, according to the Kremlin, this would be critically dangerous. How far can the European Union or Europe go in supporting Ukraine, and what risks does it take in doing so?
Well, it would be good to end this now, like the war hysteria in Europe. I was hoping for a faster process, so I thought that the moment would come sooner when the Europeans would realize that without the United States, supporting Ukraine makes no sense. Without the United States, Ukraine has no chance of even maintaining its existing positions, let alone regaining anything. I thought it would become clear that without the United States, there is no military perspective that European politicians should follow. I simply thought that the American president would come and everyone would realize that we have the opportunity and the task at all to support the American president's peace efforts. This is not what is happening. 25 out of 27 countries of the European Union, because the Slovaks and we are on the side of those who support peace and the American peace effort. The others decide to continue the war and even decide to increase the amount of war aid. The European Parliament, including the Hungarian opposition parties there, decided a few days ago that another serious multi-billion foreign military aid should be sent to Ukraine. They are asking that every state pay, including Hungary, to contribute 45 billion forints, the Hungarian opposition says in Brussels. So it is clear that there is a serious war psychosis that does not want to support the Americans, but to follow an independent European war strategy. I think this is hopeless.
So I think that this is first of all a leadership mistake, and secondly, it is not a viable idea, and it is only a matter of time, and they need to turn onto the path where the Americans, the Slovaks, the Hungarians, and the NC are also moving, and they want to achieve great peace. At the same time, there is also the issue of Ukraine's EU accession.
This week, the commissioner responsible for enlargement said that another wave of enlargement by 2030, with Ukraine and Moldova at the forefront, is very realistic. But many at home say that it is conceivable that Ukrainian accession may only be realistic in 2 decades. But how determined do you see the EU's determination to have Kiev as an EU member by 2030? Well,
when Ukraine will become a member of the EU depends on us Hungarians, and we are not very keen to say yes to this. The EU has a decision to make.
The head of the committee announced this in front of the entire European public at the open plenary session of the European Parliament, that Ukraine should be admitted to the EU by 2030. The order was given, well, throughout Europe. If someone watches international politics or simply follows Hungarians, they see that the order has been given throughout Europe. Every party that supports the Commission in Europe is speaking in the same voice today, from the Netherlands to Hungary, that Ukraine must be admitted to the European Union. And the president says that the 2030 date must also be met. The government of Hungary is against this. The Hungarian opposition, if the Hungarian opposition organized a vote on this, and actually quite fairly, I have to say that the only European party in power, in Brussels, that asked its own supporters what they thought about Ukraine's accession was the Hungarian one. And 51% of them answered yes. So this debate is a lively debate not only in Europe. Here in Hungary, there are also two strong positions. One side says that we should admit Ukraine as the chairwoman of the committee ordered.
There is another position until 2030. This is represented by the national side, the national government, the national emotional community of this country, which says that Hungary is more important than Ukraine, that its rapid admission would destroy Hungary, would mean economic bankruptcy for us, and would also carry other dangers. For example, we would also be adding a war to the European Union with Ukraine, which was otherwise established as a peace alliance. So let's not do this. Let's say no to Ukraine's accession to the European Union. This is a real, living debate throughout Europe, and between clearly distinct opposing parties. And I think it is a sensible debate here in Hungary as well.
Isn't the leader of the opposition party, TISA, saying in response to this, in response to their own questioning, that when all the conditions and the planned date of Ukraine's accession are known, they would call a legally binding referendum on this issue? What justifies the government asking the people about this now and forming it in the form of an opinion poll?
The deadline is 2030, so it won't happen. But it will happen in 2030. The chairman of the committee says he announced this, and in the end, it can't be stopped. So if someone thinks that when 26 countries have already committed themselves, and the negotiations have been conducted, and everything is ready, only one signature is missing, that Hungary alone will be able to prevent it in the end, I have such doubts. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's very difficult. Therefore, it is better to start with a clean slate and not let things get to a point where the whole of Europe will be standing on our shoulders and demanding that Hungary say yes. Either we stop this process now, or we won't know later.
Obviously, Ukraine is in a special situation from the point of view of the war, compared to other countries wishing to join. But since Hungary has been a member of the European Union, 3 countries have already joined: Romania, Bulgaria, and Croatia, and Hungary has supported all of them. If we are not talking about the war now, what other reasons are there for the government not to support this accession? That is, the accession of Ukraine.
Perhaps we should choose a suitable high level from which we can judge the whole issue. Why do we tend to admit new member states to the European Union? We tend to admit them because it benefits us, who are already inside. They didn't hire us for our 2 beautiful eyes either. Well, the Westerners decided to hire Hungary, Poland, the Czech Republic, and Slovakia because it was good for them, not because they wanted to do us any good. They may have said that, but we've outgrown the era of children's stories, so we're beyond that. So they took us in because it was in their interest. They did well with us. If we took Ukraine in and did well with it, then I would gladly say yes. But I am sure that if we take Ukraine in, we will do badly with it. And why should we do badly when we could do well, or at least protect everything we have achieved so far? Well, for example, I find it difficult to implement perhaps the most important argument, that if Ukraine is a member of the European Union, and labor flows freely from the territory of the European Union, then how are we going to protect the jobs of Hungarians? Because wages will be cut here, and so many guest workers will arrive, and not even guest workers, but workers with free movement within the union, that there will be people on the ground who can protect their own job. To put it simply, the biggest achievement of the past 15 years is that Hungary has full employment. This could disappear in a moment, in a year or 2. Then, there are the consequences for agriculture. This is such a big country with such an agricultural area that it would completely rearrange the financial foundations of the European agricultural economy. It is certain that there would be no money left for Hungarian farmers. A huge amount of poor-quality goods would arrive from Ukraine, which would drive down prices. I remind everyone that when we let them through, the Ukrainian products, only this fell off the truck, somehow stayed here, and put Hungarian grain growers in a very difficult situation. So the situation is that Hungarian agriculture would go through a massive contraction, and many hundreds of thousands of families, those who make a living from farming, those who make a living from animal husbandry, and even some of those who make a living from food waste, would be in a very difficult situation. And then there are the direct financial issues. Well, Ukraine is such a large country that all the resources of the European Union budget that can be used to support less developed countries, and from which Hungary also receives funds, would all go to Ukraine, and we would even become contributors, because then the average level of development of the Union would decrease. Then we would no longer be eligible for support, but would be contributors, and not only would the Union's money go to Ukraine, but also the Hungarian contributions, which would go to Brussels, would arrive in Ukraine with a twist, and we would also finance Ukraine's membership of the European Union. I think this is not in our interest, and Hungary has the right to stand up against my own interests.
In relation to the latter, you said a few days ago that if Ukraine becomes an EU member, there will be no EU money that could be brought to Hungary. And by the way, the debate over EU money has been on display in recent weeks after Kinga Kolar, a member of the European Parliament for the TISA party, said that the deteriorating morale of Hungarians is strengthening the opposition. In relation to this, you said that the TISA MPs are working for millions to make Hungary a failure. At the same time, Kinga Kolar stated that they started working 10 months ago to ensure that EU funds could reach Hungary directly to the people, and any claims to the contrary are pure lies. Whose fault is it that these funds are not reaching Hungary?
Let's start by learning a new name. We didn't know the name of almost any member of the TISA party until now. Now we got to know a lady named Kinga Kolar, who, let's say, with Gyurcsány's shamelessness, told Hungarians that she was working for this, and not only her, but also her party colleague. And she works every day in Brussels to prevent Hungary from receiving the resources it deserves, and she assessed it as a huge success in her own voice. Everyone could see and hear. She prevented the renovation of 50 hospitals, prevented the improvement of the symbol of public services, and that she is not ashamed of this, but is proud of it. What does this mean? It means that, let's say, you have to get up in the morning, but there are millions of us like that in Hungary. 4,700,000 people for sure. We have to get up in the morning and go to work so that we and our country can be successful, so that we can achieve certain goals. For example, to have good hospitals, for example, to improve the quality of public services, and we set many other important goals that we want to achieve with our own work. That's why we work for Hungary, of course, for ourselves, for our families, and we also work for Hungary, 4,700,000 people. But there are a few dozen people in Brussels who have to get up in the morning just like us, go to work in Brussels, and work to make sure that all of this works out for us. Not for the government. It's not about the government, but for the Hungarian people. So that 50 hospitals don't have to be renovated, so that the symbol of public service doesn't have to be built. That's what this is about. I think it's unacceptable. I would have to use words like powerful force to describe it, and even then I might be underestimating its moral content. So this is an impossible thing, and they get paid for it. So not only do they damage Hungary in social work, but they get a serious salary from Brussels for it. 7, 8, 9 million forints per month. And for this money, they do the work of trying to make Hungary a failure, to lower the standard of living of Hungarians. Now, as for the money. Now Hungary is due money. This money must be obtained. Some of this money has already been obtained. These are serious political struggles. We managed to obtain 13 billion euros. That's why we were able to noticeably increase teachers' salaries, for example, from the Hungarian budget and EU funds, which are now slowly reaching the average salary of 7,000 to 8,000 forints. And we can increase it. So we have already obtained 13 billion euros. These are coming into the Hungarian economy. This year, At least 1,000 billion forints will arrive from there. Tava has also arrived and will arrive in 2026. But there are still 11 billion euros that have been suspended, and you have to obtain them. I am fighting to get this in a way that Brussels cannot impose any restrictions in return, because this is money that belongs to Hungarians. Of course, Brussels says that if you let in migrants, give up child protection, switch from being pro-peace to being pro-war, and join the queue, then you could easily get this money. But I say, not at that price. Then we should fight for it. We will definitely get this money. We will bring it home. Hungary has the decision-making powers that the European Union needs, and it cannot do without us. So we will agree on this, just as we agreed on the first 13 billion, but this will take time and a fight, and certainly not surrender or surrender. If someone brings this money home by fulfilling Brussels' demands, they will actually make Hungary a colony of Brussels. However, we will not become a colony, so we will bring this money home while preserving Hungary's independence.
But what reasons could lie behind the TISA party's behavior in this direction that we see?
Well, maybe it's not my job to decipher this, but you don't have to be a nuclear scientist to do it. There is an agreement. They don't usually keep it a secret. The leader of the European People's Party is called Manfred Weber. He is the leader of the strongest European party. I can say with a little arrogance that he is the one who is blowing the trade winds in European parliamentary politics. And they made an agreement. They took on the TISA party. The TISA party receives support from the European People's Party. For example, by suspending the resources going to Hungary, undermining the life of the Hungarians, thereby helping TISA come to power. And in return, TISA will do what Brussels asks. There will no longer be a migrant-free Hungary, because they will let migrants in. There will no longer be child protection in Hungary, because they will let LGBTQ people roam free. And Hungary will no longer be pro-peace, because we will start to stand in line to support military actions in Ukraine. This is Brussels' expectation, and since he has included the TISA party in his program, since this is already part of his program, and they support Ukraine's rapid accession to the European Union. Done. We're done with this. Hungary as an independent state will cease to exist for a long time. And anyone who knows Hungarian history knows exactly that the one thing about Hungarian politics is that if you are independent, you can be successful, but it's not certain that you will be. You have to work hard, but you can be successful. If you are not independent, you will definitely not be successful. If you are independent, you have a chance to live a good life. If you lose your independence, you will become a poor and plundered country. They will push you back into colonial rule. Those who otherwise call themselves your friends. This is the Hungarian history lesson. I think Hungarians understand this.
Let's also briefly talk about some economic news. The Easter long weekend is behind us, during which 29% more guests stayed in domestic accommodations than last year. What do these numbers show about the state and prospects of domestic tourism?
There are two ways to look at these economic numbers. One is how many Hungarians had the money to spend Easter with their families in a catering establishment. This is also exciting. I tend to look at it from the other side. And that is how many Hungarian families make a living by running accommodation, running restaurants. So part of it is related to tourism. And there are 400,000 Hungarian families who make a living from this. So when we talk about tourism doing well, we are talking about things going well in a powerful sector of the Hungarian economy, where 400,000 families earn their living. These people who live off of this, they have built their lives on it. They have built this business. They have joined it as employees. These people have a secure livelihood through tourism. I always say that the most important thing is that everyone has a job. If there is work, there is everything. There are 4.7 million people working in Hungary, and 400,000 of these families make a living from tourism. If tourism does well, they do well too.
I also asked Prime Minister Viktor Orban about the legacy of Pope Francis, Ukraine's membership in the Union, and the related opinion vote.